and some of the broad collaboration we've had as we thought about climate issues. And as we've really thought about what can we do to reduce any potential impacts, and what can we do to ensure that the city is strong and that the investments that we make today are good for the very long term. So Chicago is not the only city thinking about some of these big issues, so I'd like to continue this conversation by introducing Luca, who will follow. And she leads the Department of Strategic Planning in Parks and Nature in Copenhagen. I'd like to hand it over to her.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you also very much for inviting me to come from across the pond to give you a little bit about what's happening in Copenhagen. In Copenhagen, we have also worked for a long time with sustainability, with resilience. The city has made a pledge to be carbon neutral by 2025, and we are still aiming at that goal. But next slide, please. Climate change is becoming very much a critical issue in Copenhagen. We are looking at the risk of having much more rain, a warmer climate, and also on the long term rising sea levels. But the main and critical factor right now is the rainwater, and that's why the city in 2011 approved its first climate adaptation plan. Next slide. Where we in this plan we have a strategy saying we have many of the same issues that Karen was talking about, but I will focus here on some of the more sort of economic factors in that. But the strategy that we're looking at is act where the risk of damage is the highest and where the estimated cost will be the highest as well. And the first aim, of course, is to prevent things from happening. That's the first and critical thing to do. But sometimes that's not economically or practically feasible. So in those respects, we actually try to minimize the effects of the damage or to reduce the vulnerabilities. We have also made, if I can have the next slide, looking at the risk assessment, where we have looked at what is the possibility of something happening. We tried mapping the city and then looking at also what if something happens, what will be the cost of damage. Next slide. And at the next slide you can see the map of Copenhagen, where we have tried not only to say what is the risk of something happening, but also the extent of damage. If you look at the colors, the redder and darker the colors are, it not only means that there's a high risk of something happening, but also that this is where the cost will be the highest. And that's of course not unsurprisingly within the city center. And the slide on the left shows the risk of rain, and the slide on the right the picture on the right shows the risk of damage from flooding from the sea. Next slide. In the climate adaptation plan for Copenhagen, we look at the possibilities of making synergies with other types of planning, saying that adapting to a changing climate must not only be looked upon as solving problems, it must also be looked upon as an opportunity to make the city greener, to make the city nicer, to live in, and creating more quality of life for people living in the city. And that is about greening the city,